just adds credence to what you're saying.
Sure.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Good evening. I am Ella Lacey, President of the Carbondale Branch of AAUW, the American Association of University Women. It is my pleasure to welcome each and everyone to tonight's program, our monthly program for April. We started the 2021 year last September, and each month we have been pleased to have offered you, our great audience, an array of great programs. To add flavoring or special context to tonight's program, I have asked one of our dedicated members, Sarah Faye Martin, to share the background related to our context of the meeting with you. Sarah Faye Martin.
I believe I'm,
You're
am
okay.
I
Yeah, you're okay.
up? Okay. Good evening. Well, our art program is named Donna Randolph Annual Art Program in honor of Donna. Donna was a very active member in AAUW for many years. She came from Marion. She taught schools. She worked in her community. She worked with our community. And she has done a lot of programming. She started years ago with a writing program and offered it to the young people. She decided way before I ever met her that it would be for junior high age. So that's 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And because they're great minds, they're thinking, they can negotiate, they're not quite into high school yet, so they don't have as much stress as the high school programs will give them, and they have the opportunity to explore. Well, the writing was not something that AAUW wanted to go with. They were interested in the art program, and they send out every year a group of cards that to represent the art in the world. And it's every person who wishes from AAUW can send out this information to the corporation, and they will make a decision to put them in the card pack every year. And Donna changed and moved to an art program. So we have been doing the art program for a number of years, and we go all over the territory. I offer it to Murfreesboro and Williamson County. We've offered it to Unity Point School, and I believe we've even gone as far as Anna and Cobden, and all in this territory. We've had some beautiful art pieces. I have sent them in to be considered for our cards. And so far we have not one, but they take like 25,000 a year to choose from. So, but we keep trying, and to have our youth to experience something and understand that this is an organization that they may want to be a part of in the future. That's where we go. We keep it rolling, and it's just been a wonderful program. And this year, because of the pandemic, we were not able to manage to have the art from the students. But I hope next year we can get them started even earlier and perhaps find a way to get it connected. This year, Julie Bohnsack, did I say that right, Julie? I hope that Julie will be able to show us what happens later when you get grown and you're an adult and you want to have another activity in your life. And she's going to show us some beautiful quilting. And in honor of Donna Randolph this evening, Julie will be showing us a quilting program and talking about it.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah Faye, for that background. To add just a little more context to this evening, just to give you some idea of our appreciation for avenues to art, I have chosen once again to share a short video clip, this time to suggest a dimension of our reach that COVID closures and lockdowns have actually enabled. How we can use a little of our time to explore the previously unreachable, an excursion into the art world of museums. So following the video, then Marcia Anderson will come to us and present our speaker for the evening. So now just relax for a moment. It's just pretty short video clip of an excursion into museums. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marcia Anderson. I co-chair the AAUW Programming Committee. We're delighted tonight to have our speaker. This evening is Julie Bohnsack, a quilting enthusiast in Carbondale. Julie is a retired Carbondale School District teacher and SIU instructor who has been quilting for 30 years, more seriously though, the past 20 years. Her work has been displayed at the Paducah Quilt Show and at the Houston International Quilt Festival several times. One of her quilting projects was selected by the Studio Art Quilt Associates for its annual exhibits tour across the country and is currently on this tour. The SAQA is an organization dedicated to bringing beautiful, thought-provoking, cutting-edge artwork to venues across the United States and around the world. Julie is also a member of the International Quilting Association, the American Quilting Association, and the Shawnee Guild, the Shawnee Quilt Guild. So anyone who has questions of Julie tonight, would you please put them into the chat box, and as she will address those questions then at the end of the presentation, and Linda Flowers will coordinate that those questions. So Julie is now going to display some of her quilting work and projects in process. So Julie, it's all yours.
Thank you. Well, hi, my name is Julie, and I'm addicted to quilting. And Marcia had mentioned to tell you about my quilting journey. So this is my journey through my quilting addiction. Okay, I'm waiting for the first slide.
Can you all see that?
I can't.
Oh, Julie, maybe it's minimized on your screen because
Okay.
it is shared.
I do not
Sorry.
see it. I don't even see it minimized.
Hmm.
There it is. I got it.
Oh,
Okay,
great.
thank
Yay.
you.
Do you want me
Thanks,
to,
Jennifer.
here, I'll go back. Or do you want me to start here?
No, we can start here.
Okay, great.
Okay. There's many people in the area. I do not stand alone as far as being addicted to quilting. And I wanted to make you aware of some of the signs of quilting addiction. One thing is petting fabric in public. And I'm not ashamed that I do that. It is enjoyable. Okay. Hoarding thread. Thread is marvelous. There's metallic, there's different colors, there's different weights. It's just absolutely wonderful. Those addicted to quilting will get goosebumps at the idea of attending a quilt show. It has been a very difficult time for us because most of the quilt shows have been canceled. However, the Houston International Quilt Show is on for November, and there's quite a few of us that are already getting excited about that. One of the main characteristics is lying to your significant other about how much you spend on fabric and other quilting notions. It can be an expensive habit, but it is well worth it. I am guilty of all of them. I am not ashamed of that. And at this point in time, I am not looking for a recovery program. So I'll just keep going with my addiction. Next slide. How it all started. My dad taught me how to sew when I was about 10 years ago, and that's a picture of him. And he was a jack of all trades. He built our first home. He taught himself how to sew. He brought home a sewing machine for my mother, and she was scared to tackle it, so he taught himself. He taught himself how to do upholstery. He taught himself how to do photography. And so he was an inspiration to me in terms of learning new things and not being afraid to try new things. How it progressed, like most people who get interested in sewing, I made clothes for myself and my children. I made a lot of clothes for myself and my children, but I didn't like trying to make them fit anymore. I just wasn't enjoying it. It wasn't fun. I saw a quilting pattern and my journey began. Little did I know what I had gotten myself into, financially and time-wise. I had no idea what was involved and how much learning there was. When I got that first quilt pattern, it was just a little Amish square thing. I didn't know what materials I needed. I didn't know I needed a quilting mat. I didn't know I needed a rotary cutter. And I sat on the floor and I was cutting out the pieces with a rotary cutter on a piece of wood. My first few attempts of quilting no longer exist, and they will never be seen by anyone. My quilting mantra is perfection is overrated. This brings me peace of mind. And I also want to say, as the slides go on, I am not really good at taking pictures of my quilts. I haven't kept track of all of them. I usually give most of them away. So the quality of the photos aren't too good, but again, perfection is overrated. This is one of my first attempts. It's called Stars in a Cabin. It is a log cabin quilt with the stars right in the middle. And a good way to start quilting is one way I started is you find a pattern or a block of the month or a quilt kit and have that as your learning experience. You learn to cut with rotary cutter. You learn to sew a 1/4 inch seam. You attempt to piece with perfection and to stitch in the ditch. Those are all the beginnings. And really, when you start sewing quilting, all you have to do is have a straight stitch, a machine that'll do a straight stitch. You also begin to learn the vocabulary, all the rules. And once you know all the rules, that's when the fun begins, because then you can start breaking them. I learned that when I was editor of the advisor for the yearbook at Carbondale High School for 24 years. And the first few years you had to stick straight to the rules. But then once you know them, then you can start having fun. This is another block of the month, actually. It was one of my early ones, and it's called Stars Over Bali. And it was my first attempt at free motion quilting. And for those of you who aren't familiar with free motion quilting, instead of stitching in the ditch between the squares, you lower the feed dogs on your machine and you actually sort of draw with your thread. You make different patterns with your thread. And it's a lot of fun, and it's very frustrating to learn at first. But now I really enjoy it, but it's still challenging. A lot of times I just make quilts for comfort. I like to have a purpose for quilts. This is my husband and my dog, Sam. And so it can be for home decor, comfort, like here, gifts. I do give most of my quilts away. And a lot of my quilts have a story behind them, and they mean something to me. This is one of the quilts that has a story behind it. This is a friend, Marcia, one of my best friends from college, and she was in a terrible car accident and had to have a 15-hour back surgery. So I made this quilt for her called Radiant Sun. And it just makes me happy to look at that picture and to know that she enjoys it. And this is another aspect of quilting, is using quilting templates. So each of those pieces of color was cut out using a template. This is another one that was fun. I like to do different things. So this one was made almost totally of squares, either cut in half and or fit to piece. And so this was Father Christmas. I made it for our bazaar at our church that we have annually to support several charities throughout the city. And it is now hanging at it was auctioned off and is now hanging at a home in a friend of mine. And I also had fun with the free motion quilting on this, and I don't know if you can tell, got to use some metallic thread, and it was just sort of a fun quilt to do. I like keeping the tradition alive of quilting. I believe in all aspects of quilting, but I think it's important that we remember the history of quilting. And so even though I've gotten a lot more into art quilts, I love the traditional quilts, and I'll occasionally hand quilt. And this was hand quilted. It's called Vintage Hourglass. And it's just nice to go back to the tradition. The machines we have these days can do so many things. But it's nice to step back and do them sort of the old-fashioned way. This one, the pattern was actually a bed cover at the very end of a bed. And my son picked out the pattern when we were in Hawaii, and he loves feathers. And so I told him I would make that for him. Each feather piece has about 49, 41, 47, I don't know, whatever pieces in it. Each one is individual. So this was done with fusible applique and free motion quilting. It was a lot of work, but he loves it. This was a great learning experience for me. I was introduced to a different type of quilting involving fusible applique, free motion quilting, and thread painting at a class I took at the National Quilt Museum in Paducah. And I couldn't believe it when it was a 3-day class. When my friend and I walked into the class, we were lugging our machines because we had taken classes there before. And the instructor, Melinda, said, "Oh, you won't need your machines." And we just sort of looked at her like, what? And so this is actually placing each of the pieces on with fusible applique. Then when you're all done, you iron everything down, and you thread paint and free motion quilt to make things pop. once I did this, I felt this was what I wanted to do. This is what I really enjoy. This was my first attempt at my own pattern with fusible applique. And like I said, all my quilts usually have a story behind them. And we had a cousin reunion on the Cape, and we actually got to stay in the gatekeeper's, the lightkeeper's cabin there. And if you are familiar with, I forget what kind of potato chips it is, but that's the picture on the potato chips, kettle potato chips, I'm not sure which one, that you can buy in the store. So I made this for my cousin, who actually arranged for us to stay there, and it was a nice memory. And so they have that hanging on their wall in Vermont, and it's a nice memory. This I'm very proud of. This is my grandson, Desi, and my son-in-law took a picture and sent it to me. And I wanted to challenge myself. And so I made the pattern, and this is Desi learning to pump on the swing. It is all fusible applique, except for the pinwheel blocks going around. And this is the one that's on a 3-year tour right now with Sakwa. And it was shown both at Paducah and Houston. This is very special to me. This is Evan, A Joyful Blessing. And some dear friends from college, their daughter was expecting twin sons. Once the sons were born, one was born with Down syndrome. And I had taught special education for 40 years. And when he sent me the photo, it really spoke to me. And so I made this quilt and sent it to them. And it's hanging in Des Moines, Iowa. This is my most recent completed quilt, and probably one that I am most proud of. I call it the Fisherman. My son is a fisherman in Juneau, Alaska. And I saw this picture online and I thought, wow. I said, I got to give it a try. And so I made the pattern and I created the quilt. But the funny story behind it is my husband kept coming in and said, what are you going to do with the water? How are you going to portray the water? And if you see, there's water flipping at the tail of the fish and dripping down from the fish and little drops of water along. And I said, well, I don't know, I'll figure out something, maybe beads or something. And he came back from the office and he said, oh, the guy says you need to do taxidermy. I go, what? And so we started researching, and you can make fake water with taxidermy supplies. And then I don't know if you see the little salmon eggs there, you can order fake salmon eggs. And so each of those salmon eggs is sewn on individually. And so this one is hanging in Juneau, Alaska, in my son's home. Many quilters have unfinished projects or unfinished, and they are commonly known as UFOs, unfinished objects. This is a Rhapsody quilt. It was a pattern by Ricky Timms. He's a fantastic quilter. And again, it taught me something new. With almost every quilt, I like to challenge myself and learn something new. I know I have to quilt it, but I just don't know how I want to quilt it yet. So I have it hanging and I look at it, I stare at it, and I try to think what I can do with it. Most quilters, the words they hate to read when doing a quiltern pattern, when they're all done with the piecing, and they're ready to quilt the 3 layers together, the final direction will read, quilt as desired. And it's just, you just hate those words because it takes some time to think and plan how you will quilt it. So I'll figure it out. I'm going to do it hopefully within this next year. This is a current project. It is ready to quilt. It's called Afternoon Delight. And as I state there, it was not a delight. It was traditional. It's sort of a traditional combined with more modern, because some of it is fusible applique, but then there's a lot of double 9 patch in there. And in each double 9 patch, there are 49 pieces. So that was a lot of work, and I really didn't enjoy it. I'm ready to go back to my art quilts. But I am going to start this in the next week or two quilting. The challenge here is I do not have a long arm machine. I do prefer to quilt all my own stuff. And so it is wrestling and wrangling the quilt under my machine as I quilt it. And the quilt will sometimes win. I know it will. And I learned from a teacher that I took a class from at the National Quilt Museum, Diane Godinsky, is never tear your work out. Don't tear it out. Don't worry about the mistakes. Don't tear it out. I don't know if I'll be able to comply with that, but I'm going to try. This is, I told you my mantra was perfection is overrated. This is a quilt I'm just finishing. It's on my machine now. I'm just finishing, and it was something fun to do before I get started on the Afternoon Delight. And I found this quilt on Facebook, and I Dwell in Possibility by Emily Dickinson. So I have a new quilting mantra, or an additional quilting mantra to add to my mantras. So it's been sort of a fun little thing to do. So what is so great about quilting? It is a challenge. It really is, but it's one you can do. It's a constant learning experience. There are so many different types of quilting ideas out there. Like I said, there's traditional, there's hand quilting, there's art quilting, fusible applique, regular applique, there's all kinds of different art quilts. And so it's just a constant learning experience. It uses the mind and body in so many ways. You use math, color, you learn so many things about color, problem solving. So if you make a mistake, or like trying to figure out how to quilt something, or how to get around in a certain way, you use both fine and gross motor skills. Fine with the machine and the piecing and stuff like that. Gross motor skills when you're cutting things out. It's decision making. What do I do next, or how do I do this? And creativity. It pushes you. It offers friendship. There are quilt guilds to join. The one locally here is the Shawnee Quilt Guild. We meet once a month in Carterville. There's classes to take. You can take those online, or the National Quilt Museum offers some great quilting classes by some master quilters. And there's quilt shows to attend. Quilt shows are awesome. And I do, if you ever have a chance, it's not a quilt show, but the National Quilting Museum in Paducah, excuse me, if you haven't visited, it is a fantastic experience. It is a true art museum. And as long as art is somewhat of your goals, it is just fantastic. I think they are now open on a limited basis. And I think you could just Google National Quilt Museum Paducah and see what their hours are. And they also have a really cute little gift store. It offers solitude. My quilt room is my safe place. I can entertain myself. I can create. I can make mistakes with no one watching or judging me. It's just my little place in the world. If you want to start quilting, this just popped up on my email the other day. The American Quilter Society is offering a free series for beginning quilters. The class begins today, but that's not a problem because you can catch up on things. The project is a beautiful scrap quilt. There's no need to sign up. You just watch online at facebook.com/AQS online. I'm not sure if you have to join AQS. If you do, it's not very expensive. And they show their lessons Tuesdays at 10 a.m. or you can catch up anytime on AQS Quilt TV channel on YouTube. I want to thank you for letting me share my quilting experience with you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Julie, for
You're
that
welcome.
great presentation. Dr. Linda Flowers is present, and we'll see if there are some questions that have come through that she can share with you from our audience.
Well, yes, there are a couple of open questions. The first one, do you sell any of your work?
No, I do not. I don't. I just don't. I don't feel confident putting a price on any of the work I have.
Okay. The next question, what makes it difficult to decide how to quilt when the pattern is already finished?
Okay, the pattern is finished, yes. But then you can decide, so you've got your 3 layers. A quilt is actually a sandwich. It consists of your backing, your matting or batting in the middle, and the top that you have completed, okay? So you have to figure out how to attach those 3 layers together. Now, the traditional way would be just to stitch in the ditch. To join the blocks, you go along the ditch that you pieced. But if you like free motion quilting, then you have to decide, do I want to do feathers? Do I want to do a specific design? Do I want to just do meandering? Do I want to do leaves? There's all kinds of things you can do. And you have to look at the space you have and what color you want to quilt with. Do you want the quilting to stand out? Or do you want it to blend in with the pattern? And you have to look at the space you have. On this one quilt that I hope to be starting soon, I've got some small squares and I'm thinking I would like to do feathers in those. Can I do feathers small enough in those that will look good? So there's all kinds of things to consider.
Next question, what does it mean to pet the fabric, as when you said a part of your addiction is petting fabric?
When you see some really nice fabric, you can't help but just run your hands along it and marvel at the beauty of the fabric itself. And then also some fabrics, like hand-dyed fabrics, have a softness to them. Batiks have more of a hardness to them. They're a real close woven fabric. And it's almost like with some fabrics, you're feeling the design or the array of colors in the fabric.
Next question, being a previous high school teacher, is there a niche for working with high school students in an extracurricular way on quilting?
I would think there is. I want to mention, I forgot to mention during my program that the National Quilt Museum, that quilting is for all ages, doesn't matter how young or old you are. In fact, when my grandkids come, we always sit down at my machine and we make some kind of project. Sometimes it's a quilting project. Sometimes I also have an embroidery quilting machine, and we'll do that depending on the age of the child. And they always want to sew and do that. In fact, Desi says, said to his other grandma, he says, "I'm sorry, you don't have a sewing machine like my other grandma." So it's something that is a great learning experience, but the National Quilt Museum sponsors an annual school quilt block program. And so kids all over the United States, and it can be Girl Scout groups or kids in classes or boys and girls clubs or whatever, they get together and they make quilt blocks, and then they are displayed at the National Quilt Museum, and they're divided up into different ages. So and also the National Quilt Museum offers some quilt classes for high school kids and junior high kids. It's a great learning experience.
Okay, Dr. Lacey, there are no more open questions.
All right. Well, one thing about it, our speaker, Julie Bohnsack, made quilting seem like an intriguing endeavor. I wish most of us had known a little bit more about quilting, and maybe we wouldn't have had to ask such basic questions, but you know what? I know that we're better informed, and you have made us know that quilting is certainly not a bad addiction. We loved your presentation of that, and we sincerely thank you for sharing your beautiful, artful work with us.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Okay. In the interest of AAUW, we once again thank you, the audience and panelists, for supporting us in the 2021 year program. We also want to thank the Carbondale Public Library, who has helped us every step along the way in order to keep our program alive all year. So now we're at our last regular meeting of the year, and our next meeting in May is an internal program. But following our tradition, we'll then cease our programming during the summer, and it is our sincere hope that you who have participated with us this year will join us again next September. So thank you for joining us in a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next year at next program.